Welcome to Community Cafe, where strangers become new friends. New friends become old friends, and old friends become family. Please join our table or take a seat at the counter. We're glad you came. Welcome to Society Bites Radio, and I'm your host today, Kate O'Neill. The Illuminati Ball merges the myth and the mystery surrounding the secret organization of the rich and powerful who supposedly control the world with a story about human-animal hybrids who have escaped an experimental lab. Inspired by the legendary 1972 surrealist masquerade party that influenced Stanley Kubrick's film Eyes Wide Shut, hosted by the Baron and Baroness de Rothschild at their mansion in Paris, the Illuminati Ball combines elements of the fantastical with the reality to tell an unforgettable story about power, cruelty, deceit, betrayal, and the insatiable hunger for freedom. Cynthia von Buehler is an American artist, performer, playwright, and author, hailed by the press as multi-talented and eccentric, and a rising star. And one of the top contemporary surrealists, Cynthia von Buehler has made a name for herself as an award-winning and critically acclaimed fine artist, author, and illustrator. Her illustration work has won awards from the Society of Illustrators and has repeatedly appeared in American Illustration, Communication Arts, and the Society of Illustrator Annuals of the Best Illustration in America. Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Tell us a little bit more about Cynthia. Where are you from? How did you come to write illustrated novellas?
I grew up in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, and I have been drawing and making art since I was a little girl. I was from a very artistic, large family, and I've had an interesting path. I've been doing art my whole life, but I also sort of did other things like, I was in a band, and I ran a record label, and I did all these other things. But I think I got into books when I started writing and illustrating children's books. And I really enjoyed that. I love writing and illustrating books for children. However, I was interested in writing books for adults and, with more, so I could explore human nature for adults. And so when I heard about graphic novels, I was really excited because this is, a new art form where I could make picture books, but for adults.
I think does
that answer your question?
It does. And I think our picture books today are more like adult comic books.
They are.
For those of us who grew up in the comic book era, when that was all we had, the illustrated books tend to bring us back to our childhood just a little bit, only with more intriguing stories, I should say. Tell me about this
I was searching for the correct word.
Well, it definitely does give a completely different, how do I say this, bent on illustrations. Mm-hmm. I think we all enjoy this, but this particular book, because of its content, tell our listeners a little bit about the so-called secret society and its background. Where does this come from?
Okay, so a long, long time ago, there was an organization called the Illuminati, and it was started to enlighten people and to separate church from state. And it was actually an organization for good. And the church didn't like that, though, because they controlled the masses and they did not like this organization. So they made it illegal for these people to meet. So they had to go underground And then they eventually they couldn't even do that, and so it sort of splintered and broke up, and nobody knows if it ever continued. But because the church was against it, they started all these rumors about it, and it became known as sort of this evil organization. And then later, in the 70s and 80s, it sort of changed even further and sort of became more of a conspiracy theory, and also negative devil worship and all of these other things. But when it first started, it was not about that. It was about enlightenment and free ideas and trying to make the world a better place.
Now, in the story, you have two main characters, Mr. and Mrs. Rothschild. Tell us about those two characters and how they play such an important role in this.
Okay, well, so in the 70s, there's actually a Baron and Baroness de Rothschild, and they lived in Paris, and they decided to have an Illuminati ball, a surrealist Illuminati ball. And I also put on theater, and I make theater productions for my books. And I have a choreographer, and she saw these pictures from this party and showed them to me, and they were just so remarkable. They had all these really intense masks. Many of them were animal related. The Baroness wore a mask that was a stag head with diamond tears. And when I saw these pictures, my choreographer said, we should do a show about this. This is really interesting. I thought, I thought, I looked at the picture of the Baroness with the stag head and diamond tears, and it made me think about animals and the sadness of animals and the climate and how, humankind is hurting them. And, the tears really made me think of that. So when I was writing a story, I wanted it to be sort of combined elements of this exciting party, but then also bring in a story about animals and human nature.
All right. Now, I've heard of the ball, but have never been, nor have I known anyone who has. Your style is pretty avant-garde with some good twists and turns. Can you tell us a little bit about how this story begins to progress?
Well, it's many people who we've been holding these Illuminati balls for 4 years in New York City. And some of them are, when we started, we were doing small, intimate balls where we would blindfold people, then take them outside of the city to an estate and sort of initiate them into the Illuminati. And then as the night goes on, they realize that there's much more to this story than just an Illuminati ball. So it's a little bit subversive the way we approached it. They have to fill out, everyone who came had to fill out an application and be accepted. And then when they attended, they really were they weren't sure what they were getting into, but they were kind of excited. But some people thought they were actually being initiated into the Illuminati. And I tried to avoid accepting people like that because we didn't want to prey upon people who really believed in it. I personally do not believe that there's an Illuminati, but many people do. So and then throughout the course of the evening, you find out that this isn't what you thought it was. But people who attended, they said things like, "This was the best night of my life," and they really bonded with the characters, and they explored the grounds. Everybody went swimming naked. It was just a really intense night that we offered to people.
All right. Now this would really be an intense night because I'm seeing things, forgive me. I'm seeing things that are kind of disturbing to a certain extent. The Baroness has a baby, and the baby's not quite human.
Yes. The baby is, we should warn people, this is spoiler, but the baby, the Baroness is actually, so they're actually animal human hybrids that have escaped a lab. And this is actually true. So there's a lot of science in my book that's actually real. So they are creating animal-human hybrids now using a technology called CRISPR. And it's really, it can be a wonderful thing for humanity, but it can also be a terrible thing. I don't think humanity is ready for this because it's really like playing God, creating a new species. And the problem is that, humanity, whenever they come up with some new invention, they want to figure out how they can use it, and not necessarily in positive ways. So, not thinking about this is a new creature and this is going to be a new form of slavery. So, they want to humans are going to use this now for organs, to grow organs in these animal-human hybrids. And this has already begun. Like, they're doing these things in China. They're putting human DNA in pigs and, to harvest their organs. And so I thought about that story. I find it horrifying. I do think CRISPR could be used in a good way, but it really needs to be monitored. And so anyway, my story, there's these animals that escape this type of lab like this, and they, of course, look more human than they do animal-like, although they're all a little bit different. And they come upon the Georgia Guidestones, which is it's a monument that actually exists in Georgia with these 10 commandments on it. It's this mysterious Stonehenge-like monument, and it has these 10 commandments. And the last commandment is they really related to. So it's be not a cancer on earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. And so they sort of see this and make this almost their religion. And they're hiding out near this, and on the stones, there's some graffiti that says "Die Illuminati pigs." Now, this is actual graffiti somebody sprayed on the monument because many people think it's an Illuminati monument. And so Pig King, one of them, who is part pig and part human, sees this and decides, thinks, oh, there's Illuminati pigs out there. They're naive. So, he starts researching the Illuminati, and then it goes on from there. They meet me, and I bring them to my estate, and that's where he comes up with the idea to hold an Illuminati ball in order to get power. I know that sounds pretty intense and crazy. But.
It does. I mean, do you get to the point where you kind of think maybe they should have stopped at stem cells?
Yeah, well, I think that it's interesting because the people who invented CRISPR, it could really, do some amazing things, but I don't think that we're ready for it because, they're going to use it to make everybody blonde and blue-eyed, or, it's, that's part of my story too. Everybody who they invite to this ball somehow has been in their lives in the past. There's a reason for each person who they invite to attend. And so in the wrong hands, and you look at what we've done to the planet. We're just not ready yet.
Well, it also tends to remind me of things that I've seen basically on the History Channel, where they talk about the Anunnaki, where they are part human and part bird, or there were human horse mixes, or and they used them for workers, apparently, according to what the current day alien hunters look for.
Yeah.
And your story actually kind of goes along with some of that, and some of the characters actually look like some of the characters that the Anunnaki were supposed to have created.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and I feel like if a new I have no problem with a new species being created. I think that's kind of interesting if there were animal humans walking amongst us. But the problem is that most likely, and as you can see from what's already happening, is that humankind will make them into slaves, and that's just not cool. That doesn't sit right with me, and so we don't need another species or race that we're going